I have much to read for you, but I'm going to impart with you from my own how I see things. And my task today is to provide some ideas as to why our intelligence in Afghanistan has been lacking, that we have not done as well as we could have or should have, and what is going to take, in fact, to fix the situation, so that we can get a more relevant, a more timely intelligence in order for us to execute our mission in a much more effectively and in a timely manner. But the truth is, before I can even get into this, I think it's critically important for us to understand first what it is that we need to be doing in Afghanistan in the first place. That is, are we in fact clear about our mission in Afghanistan? That is, we cannot, from my perspective, talk about deficiency in intelligence gathering. We cannot talk about the effectiveness of intelligence gathering unless we understand what the mission is all about, and to see if we in fact correlate between the two and find some consistency. That is, the best intelligence gathering agencies anywhere in the world, they could gather whatever it is that they want, but if it is not relevant to the mission itself, it is meaningless. And so therefore, we have to begin the discussion, and then of course I will go through a list, what was lacking without any question, and what can be done about it. But before, let me first try to ask ourselves the question is, what is our mission in Afghanistan? That is, I think it is incumbent upon us today, specifically as the administration, in fact, reassessing the situation in Afghanistan, our responsibility is to define that mission. Are we in fact committed to counterinsurgency in Afghanistan, or are we in fact committed to counterterrorism in Afghanistan, or are we engaged in both, and to what end if that was the case? And let me say from at the outset, in my view, that is, when we look at immediately 9/11, and President Bush decided to go to Afghanistan to wage war. That is, the Taliban were then in power. They refused to cooperate. That is, the Bush administration basically gave them an opportunity to cooperate with us in order not to prevent the invasion of Afghanistan in the first place. But there was no cooperation. They were not ready at the time. And so we went. We could justify the invasion of Afghanistan in order to deal with Al-Qaeda. I don't think 9 years later that the principal mission should have changed or could have changed. That is, are we in Afghanistan today because we want to defeat the Taliban, because we want to change a government in Afghanistan? What it is that we want to do? Because if our principal mission was to deal with counterterrorism to begin with, well, the truth of the matter is Al-Qaeda is not in Afghanistan per se. The majority of their infrastructure, training camps, personnel, they are in Pakistan, not in Afghanistan. So what are we in fact doing in Afghanistan? Now, surely, when you fight a war for more than 9 years now, we're going into the 10th or so soon. And when you talk to the generals and the politicians and those who are committed to winning wars, from their perspective, well, we have invested so much time, so much energy, so many resources, and so we have an obligation to win. That is, the United States, it's standing in the international community. We have to win. We have to show that we have not wasted so much for nothing. But that is, again, the wrong premise. As if we do not know exactly what it is that we want to achieve, as the reassessment is taking place nowadays, what in fact are we going to win in Afghanistan? And who is going to guarantee that in 5, 10, or 15 years down the line, the status quo ante will not be reversed just the way it is today or was yesterday or 2 years ago? So therefore, it is incumbent upon us to define the mission today. In my view, the focus ought to be on counterterrorism, not counterinsurgency, because under no circumstances, and those of us who've been involved in intelligence, have been at the scene, will tell you time and again, under no circumstances will the United States be able to subdue, to kill, or to decapitate the Taliban as a movement. We can weaken it, we can displace some of their members, but this is not a campaign that we can win in any classic sense. There is going to be no military victory there. It's not going to happen. Which means if we are going to redefine the mission and we are going to focus on counterterrorism, then we're going to have to be looking at an entirely different set of what kind of intelligence are we going to need and where should our focus be. The second point that we have to define, that is, having said what I said, we can't still cut and run. That is, we are spending basically now, I'm told, to the tune of $100 billion a year in Afghanistan. This is an astronomical amount of money to spend. It's averaging about $250,000 per soldier per year. But then again, we cannot cut and run. We, over time, 9 years later, we have now a moral obligation to do something. But that moral obligation does not translate to America staying in Afghanistan for the next 10 years. And it does not translate to nation building. And it should not translate to anything that we cannot handle in a manner that is consistent with our moral obligations, but it should not go beyond our means and ability to execute it and leave Afghanistan with some kind of face-saving way out. So we have these kind of obligations. As the United States stands today, in the eyes of the international community, we cannot simply cut and run, and therefore we have to do certain things while we're still there. But while we're still there, meaning, what does that really mean? It means that we are going to do basic things necessary until such time where we feel that our mission, how we redefine it in terms of counterterrorism, is more or less been accomplished. So whether we need to do basic nation building, when I talk about basic nation, perhaps building a few roads here and there are necessary for transportation, but by and large, our focus will have to be training Afghani soldiers. And let me just give you some statistics about that. Training Afghani soldiers today for the United States costs about $12,000 a year. And to maintain them in the Afghani force will cost another $12,500. Basically, we will be spending 10% on an Afghani soldier than what we spend on an American soldier, being 1 year in Afghanistan after the training. This is just a fact. So we have to do certain things in order to leave Afghanistan in a manner that is not because after all we have created a certain chaos in there. And we cannot just leave it with that kind of chaos. So we have basic requirements that need to be done, to be performed before we can before we can leave. And the third element that I think we should establish for ourselves is the fact that this war cannot be won. That is, we need to admit to ourselves that we are not going to win. You talk to General McChrystal before and now to General Petraeus, and you talk to some of the Republican leadership in Congress. We still have that kind of mentality that we're going to win this kind of war in Afghanistan. This is not a war that can be won. We don't have the stamina, in fact not even the means, to sustain this kind of battle, this kind of conflict, because the Taliban, they will outlast us time and again, no matter how much effort, energy, and resources we put in there. As Henry Kissinger just very recently observed, no power ever has been able to pacify Afghanistan. And it's not going to